So my name is Sarah Broscombe. I'm from the north of England and I'm a trainer, facilitator, coach and retreat guide. So I spend about half my time working with groups and about half my time developing people. Listening liberates people because so few people are really, truly, deeply listened to. Many people have very little of that in their life at all, and it's very potent. I'd say the do's and don'ts of listening are simpler than we might expect and harder to do. Do's, I'd say trust the listening itself, trust its power, and don't feel you have to be clever. But maybe most important is love the person. And I think the more we listen deeply, the more genuinely curious we become, and the more we love the person. But in terms of don'ts, I'd say don't let your anxiety of being good value for a person get in the way. Try not to be anxious, because it will dominate. And don't try and be complete. Don't feel that when you're listening, you have to bring things to a neat, tidy resolution. As a listener, you're there to open some doors and some windows and invite a person to draw back some curtains. That's all. I think managers and leaders really need to listen because we all know how we react when we are not listened to. We sometimes know the power of listening in leadership best by our experience of when it hasn't happened. I think bad listening often looks like somebody who begins by listening and then switches into advice mode. And often their body language mirrors that too. They start quiet, they begin to intervene more, but also they start relaxed and they begin to become the protagonist. I think that's bad listening. I think feedback is vital for the balance of growing self-awareness for the people receiving and growing mutuality between the giver and the receiver. When we operate in a culture where there's hardly ever feedback, it feels very frightening when it happens. But when there's a flow of feedback to and fro, trust grows very slowly, but very surely. And the feedback leads to us being less afraid of our own blind spots, as well as being less afraid of sharing what we've noticed with each other. When I was training as a spiritual director, I received some really useful feedback from my supervisor, who was profoundly deaf. So I wore a little machine so he knew roughly what was going on, but his feedback was about my presence. And he gave it very, very plainly. He simply said, if anything is going to get in your way, this will be what it is. And you have the gift for this. And the feedback was so useful because I believed it utterly, and he gave it very simply, very authentically. Positive feedback can be very useful and also very uncomfortable. The most important thing about positive feedback is that it's genuine, it's true, and it sounds like the person giving it means it. But it matters a lot, partly because positive feedback creates a culture in which negative or difficult feedback is easier to receive. I think when a person is uncomfortable with being praised and admired and gushed over, you can't be saying to them, you are wonderful. It won't help them. But you can be saying, when you did so-and-so, it had this positive impact. It's very realistic, it's very practical, but the person feels seen and valued. So developmental feedback is the normal feedback that we tend to use maybe monthly or every couple of months. And again, using it often makes it land less loudly. So if we do it regularly, people don't get paranoid about being criticised. And it blends together the person who is about to receive the feedback, analysing themselves, telling you what they are doing well, the manager then confirming that and perhaps adding something else that is going well or why they appreciate this so much. And then going on to take that to the next level or to grow even further or to make the most of that, you could consider this. So it's offered. So an example of developmental feedback might be asking a person how their workload is going. They self-analyse. The manager says, yeah, you are so conscientious. It's noticed and it's really appreciated. And to get the most out of your time in this job, you're going to want to consider giving the same conscientiousness to yourself and your self-care as you do to your workload. And it's going to help, and I want you to do it. Critical feedback is hard to receive, and it's not until we're leading people that we understand that it's almost as hard to give, if not harder. A critical feedback that invites the person to give their own understanding early and to give their own solutions is much more likely to be effective because it feels so respectful. So you might start by stating the situation and then ask the person why, and then listen. So, for example, it's been noticed that at every team meeting, you're interrupting quite often. Have you noticed that? Why is that? And then listen. And then the next step is not to say, this is why that's bad, or I'm disappointed in you. The next step is to say, and this is the impact. So instead of commenting on the person, you're saying that behaviour means that these other people are not rising to the challenge and are not getting to do what they need to do. And then ask for their solutions. And the person may well solve the problem for you, which means that you don't have to be the bad cop. And also it means you find out whether they are able to accept feedback or whether they go straight back into defensive mode. So you have more data to work with. And then agree solutions and write them down. So nobody is relying on your memories being the same. Your emotions during a meeting of critical feedback will not be the same, so don't expect to remember it the same either. I think teams always have more potential than the individuals who make them up. And if we approach them in a 1+1+1 way, that's all we get. But there's something special about an Ignatian team, Jesuits and lay people working together, because the respect and the belief in the value of being mutual together allows us to be more than the sum of our parts and infuses it with a different character of belief in people because of their value in the heart of God, means that we value them differently in our own hearts, and we aspire to it even when we struggle to. It can sound corny to talk about love in management and love in leadership, but love is what will make the difference between listening creatively and listening adequately. And it's what will make the difference between whether feedback works or doesn't. So the attitude in which we do it is more important than anything else. It's more important than the techniques. It's far more important than anything we actually say.